Overreaction Monday is back, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we have a lot to overreact or not overreact to, from surprise upsets, from the game of the decade, maybe even of all time, to breakout performances and many more around the SEC. It's all right here. It's Overreaction Monday on SEC Unfiltered. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Lucas Hill. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to follow for more from us here at SEC Unfiltered. Also, check out the podcast version of this episode over at secunfiltered.com and follow us on all the socials, X, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. This video has been brought to you by, as always, for every Overreaction Monday, by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app on your Apple or Android device, or go to prizepicks.com and use the code SECU at initial sign up to get $50 instantly when you play that first $5 or more lineup. Now, I do want to emphasize ahead of time, I do apologize for my voice. I'm a bit hoarse. I don't feel that great, but hey, we're still doing Overreaction Monday, and it doesn't matter to me. So we're going to go ahead and get it started with this Overreaction Monday once again, and let's talk about every SEC team that played this weekend so I can kind of save my voice, because it would be kind of hard to talk about every SEC team since they really didn't play all at once today. So we're going to start off with LSU. You got two breakout stars in the mix. Caden Durham had a heck of a game on Saturday against South Alabama. 7 carries for 126 yards and to go along with a touchdown. Garrett Nussmeier finishes with over 400 yards. The other breakout star, surprisingly, when you think about the receiving route, you're thinking about Kyron Lacey, Chris Hilton, Mason Taylor, guys like that you expect to have great years. CJ Daniels as well. Aaron Anderson has come a long way since his last year. He's turned into one of the premier guys that's a number 2 option in this offense. He's starting to climb up the depth chart and really get his touches as he's deserved. He's finished off with, I think, 5 or 6 catches last week and is really coming to his own. He's starting to develop more as a legitimate threat in this offense, and I think Joe Sloan is going to use him in a lot of different ways. They tried to do it last year, but with the amount of depth they had with guys like Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors last year, it was just hard to get him implemented into the offense. For Mississippi State, could they win another SEC game this year? It seems very unlikely. Okay, and hear me out. Look, Mississippi State played they played better than expected against Texas. They kept this game close going into the fourth quarter, and then Texas came in and put it all away at the end of the day. So as good as Mississippi State can be, but this was a tough loss for them. They could have had it at times, but I mean, the offensive line really did a lot better than expected. They had protection breakdowns near the end of the game. The tight ends started to come into their own. I mean, with a young quarterback in Michael Van Buren, it's very hard to get this offense going. We don't know if Blake Shapen will stay around for another year in the Jeff Lebby era. But it's going to get off to a rough start. I mean, the rest of this year is not a gimme for Mississippi State. It's going to be very tough for them to win another SEC game, to even come close to a bowl game. They may finish off the year. They're 1-4 right now, and their only chance to even get to a bowl game is if they would have started 3-0, which I thought they had a legitimate opportunity to do. But following that Arizona State loss, the wheels just have come off the Mississippi State train after that. These next 3 games are going to be brutal. You go to Georgia in 2 weeks. You play Texas A&M and Arkansas at home, but both teams are with young quarterbacks, and both teams are going to be much better on their offensive line. Your defense is going to get decimated. You may not win another SEC game this year because this is a tough SEC schedule that you have. Not only do you have those, you have Tennessee you go to Neyland Stadium for, you go to Vaught Hemingway and play Ole Miss, and then you play Missouri at home. So all likelihood you may finish 2-10 this year, which is not what people expected. Many people were thinking if you got to 5-7, it would be a win for year one in the Jeff Lebby era. But so far, you're starting off pretty horrible right now. For Auburn, Is Hugh Freeze's seat beginning to heat up? I'm not sure just yet, but how Auburn performed this past Saturday, they did better than a lot of people were expecting. This was a rough way to lose this game. It was a bad gut punch. The RPOs that you're used to seeing with Hugh Freeze, you came up with a lot of new formation. You mixed up the run block schemes. I mean, that you thought that near the end of the game, you thought you had multiple opportunities to win that game, but your offense just couldn't put together any drive. You got shut down, especially when you got on the other side of the 50. And really, it's just a difficult way to lose that game. That was a game you had to have if you were Auburn, and you failed to capitalize off of the opportunities that you were given. The rest of the year for Auburn, I do think they have an opportunity to get back to a bowl game, but it's going to get rough. The next 3 games are brutal on the road. You go to Georgia this upcoming weekend. You go to Missouri in 2 weeks afterwards, and then you play Kentucky. You may not win another SEC game until you get to Vanderbilt on November 2nd. And even then, you could be looking at a 2-6 Auburn team that would have to win their Final Four to even get to a bowl game. And that's not including playing Texas A&M and going to Alabama for the Iron Bowl. So if Auburn does finish with a losing record, I think Hugh Freeze's seat will be heating up following this year, just with how they performed and how they've been so underwhelming. And this goes to show you, I think this seat started to heat up in the offseason when they didn't even get a transfer portal quarterback, at least somebody that had enough experience to go into this offensive system and really thrive and be a much better option than what they have right now with Peyton Thorne and with Hank Brown. For Arkansas, you failed to finish yet again, and this is going to be the downfall of Sam Pittman. This has been his legacy ever since he came to Fayetteville. Now you go back to what he did in 2021. They go 9-4 that year. They do great. They have unbelievable talent on all sides of the ball. You couldn't do it. You couldn't finish the job at Ole Miss in 21. You gave up an early lead against Auburn, against Alabama. Good come from behind win. Wasn't able to get it done at the end of the day. That's okay. That's a loss that you would have taken. Now in 2022, you thought expectations were going to be at an all-time high. You beat a ranked Cincinnati team at the beginning of the year. You start off 3-0. You don't finish the job in Arlington. You get blown out back-to-back weeks against Alabama and Mississippi State. You go to Liberty and get upset, and that's when people should have thought, okay, maybe Sam Pittman may not last. I thought he could have been fired last year if he hadn't gone to a bowl game, but you get the late win against Ole Miss that saves your season, and you win a bowl game, saves them for another year. Despite the 4-8 season, the Dan Enos hire was absolutely atrocious. Your offense did nothing with what KJ Jefferson was accustomed to. I think that's why you entered the portal. And then last year, you talk during a stretch when they lost 6 in a row, you had five of those 6 games were one-possession games that you should have won. You should have handled business against LSU. You should have handled business against BYU, Ole Miss, Alabama, Mississippi State, where you were irrelevant on offense. You had opportunities to win that game. You had an opportunity to at least be a 6 or 7 win team last year. And now you're going into this year. You fail yet again to finish the job against Oklahoma State. You couldn't do it against Texas A&M. And now the next 3 games are gut check times. You could have an opportunity to pull the upset against LSU, who will be coming off of that Ole Miss game. That could be a game where you could catch them in a trap. That's what happened with LSU 2 years ago. That's what happened to them last year. Look, if you remember 2 years ago, LSU comes off the big win against Alabama, and their offense looks really bad against Arkansas. And then all of a sudden, people are on the people are criticizing Sam Pittman for not being able to finish the job. This could be eventually what leads to his downfall as the Arkansas head coach. Now for Kentucky, are they the second best defense in the SEC? I still think that South Carolina has the best defense overall, But from after what I saw, how Kentucky literally got after Jackson Dart on a consistent basis, I think they got to him 5 times all game yesterday. They forced some mistakes on their offensive line. Their offensive line has a lot of question marks for Ole Miss. So if you look overall at what they have, Kentucky came in and dominated. Deion Walker had a great game. I mean, on that front four, you can't give nothing but praise all across the defensive line. They did a really good job of being able to finish the job. Finally, Kentucky finally got Brock Vandagriff in a rhythm. Barian Brown had a big game. Demis DS Carnegabi had a big game. I mean, Mark Stoops challenged him before the game to have a big run, and he did. He showed up in big situations, and Brock Vandagriff, with his back against the wall, with all the criticism from the fans about being underperforming, with the help of his offensive line and what he did against Ole Miss is awesome to see. And it's amazing to look at the play calling that Ole Miss had. And finally, Bush Hamden called a great game for Kentucky for that last drive. They got to Jackson Dart quite a bit. I think they had 5 sacks. Held them to 353 total offense. Their rush offense was irrelevant with 92 yards rushing. If you take away the one Henry Parrish run where he ran for 17 yards, Ole Miss held him to 12 carries for 45 yards. That's impressive. Trey Harris had a big game, but we'll get to them in a little bit. The late fumble that he lost really hurt if you're Ole Miss. But look, they got to him 4 times during that game. Octavius Oxendine had a big game with 2 sacks to go along with 3 tackles. Pop Dumas had a half a sack and a 1.5 TFLs. Denellis Jackson, 7 tackles, a half tackle and a half of TFLs. GQ Hardaway, big game. I mean, that's what you wanted from that Kentucky defense, and they're going to be in contention to have the best defense in the SEC. Them and South Carolina right now, I think they're tied right now for the best defense in the SEC as of now. When you look at Oklahoma, it's time to roll with Mike Hawkins Jr. Look, he had a great game. I really do think that if you give him time in this offense, he's going to develop at a very high level. I think that when you look at how he performed during this game, you see a lot of good and you also see a lot of bad. But guess what? You can build off of that. You have the opportunity to do that with a young quarterback. And that's what people need to emphasize with a guy like Mike Hawkins. Finished with almost 250 yards of total offense. But look, when you get him comfortable in the vertical passing game, when you get him out of the screen game, when you get him out of the short intermediate routes, you're going to see him be a lot more comfortable in this offense, and you're going to see him really perform at a high level. And I have to give credit where credit is due. I think this Oklahoma defense got after Peyton Thorne on a consistent basis. Peyton Thorne really had a decent game. 21 of 32, 338, and 3 scores and the 1 interception. But at the end of the day, Oklahoma's passing attack and the way they were able to stretch the field, you get him on the option, you counter off with the run game. That was really good. He and Javonte Barnes combining for 130 yards against a pretty decent Auburn front that really had moments during the game. You got to give credit. That was a great game that Seth Luttrell dialed up for Mike Hawkins to be prepared for going up against a pretty decent Auburn defense. Now Oklahoma has generated some momentum. They get the bye week to prepare for Texas, and they could be having an opportunity to knock off the Longhorns next week when they come to town or when they meet up in the Cotton Bowl. For Texas A&M, Nick Scourton had a great game. Nick Scourton was a baller. That goes to show you why he was one of the most sought-after defensive linemen in the SEC. Nick Scourton came out and out-shined against a fairly struggling Arkansas offensive line. And look, Scourton's kind of been held in check most of the season. But he came into this year and was so disruptive all game. Gets 2 sacks, disrupts Taylon Green on the final drive of the game, and they managed to get the go-ahead at sack to win the football game for them. I'll tell you what, Texas A&M, their defense could be the reason why they continue to perform at a high level. They could be looking at a 9 or 10 win season if they continue with what they've been doing. Now, their schedule favors them too. The only real tough test that they have, other than what they already had with Notre Dame, they get Missouri and LSU both come to College Station. They get Missouri, LSU, and Texas. All of them come to College Station. Let me just remind you. They could pull an upset here and there. They could knock off Missouri next week with how their defense performed. So if they do that, you're looking at potentially a 6-1 as A&M team going to play LSU at College Station. Then you go to South Carolina, you play New Mexico State, you play Auburn, and then you get the Lone Star Showdown with Texas. That could be a game that if you're Texas A&M, you could be 8-3, 9-2, looking to contend for a 10-win season, and you could potentially have that if you knock off Texas. I do believe that could happen as well. So, but at the end of the day, Nick Scourton and that Texas A&M defense is really scary to look forward to. I think the offense is going to get clicking soon. I think that when you get Marcel Reed comfortable in the Colin Klein offense, look, there's no telling what this team can do, and it's going to be fun to be able to watch this team. Georgia. Unfortunately, Carson Beck is no longer a Heisman contender. I thought that Carson Beck was going to win the Heisman after week 1. I liked what he did. I thought he had an opportunity to have a Joe Burrow type of season. But look, the slow start was – no, I'm sorry. But the slow start hurt Carson Beck tremendously. I think they had 2 turnovers to start the game. I think both of his passes got picked. You get off to a really bad start. During that game, you're down 28-0. You had your first 3 interceptions of the season. Now, look, I'll give you credit. You came back and played at a higher level in the second half, being able to bring this team back from 28 down. You get some big plays down the field. You get the big Dylan Bell little touchdown. You get the Lawson Lucky touchdown. Arian Smith gets in. I mean, both of these teams combined for over 1,000 yards. But the turnovers at the start of the first half killed Georgia and then sealed his fate for the Heisman at the end of the game. That was a heck of a game that we got to witness on Saturday, which brings me to my next point. Since he's no longer a Heisman contender, boom. Jalen Milroe won the Heisman this past Saturday. Bear with me, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm about to get on my soapbox. If you think that Jalen Milroe didn't win the Heisman Trophy on Saturday, you're dead wrong. Forget Carson Beck. Forget Dylan Gabriel. Forget all of them. You could potentially have 2 in New York with Ryan Williams and Jalen Milroe. Ryan Williams is the most talented receiver I have seen since Devontae Smith. Ryan Williams is unbelievable. 17 years old. He's technically supposed to be in high school right now, playing in his senior year. He reclassifies and is torching college-level defensive backs. Imagine what he could be doing in high school right now. He's bullying these dudes. And when you have a young quarterback that has developed so much in the Kalen DeBoer offense, like what Jalen Milroe has done, and you put up almost 500 yards against Georgia's defense, you won the Heisman. You have my vote. Your play on the field just proved why you're going to be the number 1 voter for the Heisman Trophy. You're the number 1 guy that's going to be at the top of the list from now all the way up to December. Nobody is ever even going to overtake you unless you put up another performance, unless you put up 600 yards of total offense, unless we see another Joe Burrow type performance. Jalen Milroe has won the Heisman Trophy right now. You could just give it to him right now. He won it. That performance on Saturday was one of the best that you've ever seen. Think about this. The redemption story. You get benched last week after a poor performance. There's talks of your head coach leaving. He leaves. You could have left too, just like majority of the guys did. You took the blame after the Rose Bowl, after a bad decision to not follow your guard into the end zone. But you come back 1 year later and you're putting up Heisman-esque numbers. Jalen Milroe, guess what? You just won the Heisman Trophy. You have my vote, and I think the country agrees with me. You just won the Heisman Trophy. Congratulations. We'll go ahead and just give you the Heisman Memorial Trophy right now. It'll be shipped to you in about 2 days. Going on to Texas. Is there a quarterback battle now in Austin? Now you get 2 weeks to prepare for this. You wanted Arch Manning to start in SEC play. Now you go into the Red River rivalry, where Oklahoma's defense is going to be much better. They performed very well against Peyton Thorne, but this isn't Peyton Thorne, and this isn't Auburn's offensive line. This is a Texas offensive line that is unbelievably good. Now the thing is, do you play both quarterbacks, or are you sticking with one for the game this upcoming weekend? Is Quinn Ewers healthy enough to perform it for Red River? We'll just have to see. Arch Manning's played the last 2 games he's played, phenomenal. Great games that he's had so far. I have no ill will towards him, and I will not have an ill will towards him. He's playing really well. He's playing like a man possessed. There's a reason why he was one of the most sought-after quarterbacks in high school and why he didn't leave, because he can fit well in the Steve Sarkisian offense. Now, the question of it is, do they go back to Quinn Ewers, or do you give the keys to Arch Manning to start the game off? But if he struggles, do you go back to Quinn Ewers, or do you flip-flop that? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered, not just this week, but also next week leading up to the game as well. We won't get an answer as to who will be the starter this upcoming game until we get to game week. So until then, there's just going to be a lot of speculation going into the Red River rivalry. And for Ole Miss to finish off Overreaction Monday, are you too reliant on Trey Harris? I don't think so. I'll be honest. But look, it's been your number one guy all year. I mean, why do you want to not go to him on a consistent basis? But I will say this. I already mentioned last week, Trey Harris is on pace to break a lot of records in Ole Miss history. But you have other guys that have not really been able to see the football. Caden Prescorn, he was supposed to be one of the top tight ends coming into the SEC season. I had him in the top 5. But he hasn't really gotten his touches. 1 catch for 42 yards, and that came in the 4th quarter. Other than that, that's really it. He's only had 2 real big games, 3 catches for 48, 3 catches for 77 during the first 2 weeks of the season. But after that, you've had a total of 4 catches in total for 56 yards. 42 of them came last week. So, with that being said, defenses are going to scheme up against Trey Harris. You got to disguise that and be able to spread the football out as much as possible so that you aren't just relying on number 8 or on number 9. You got to be able to get it out to your other big-time receivers. You got to be able to get Henry Parrish working in the open space. You got to be able to have a much better offensive line protection as well. So there's a lot of question marks surrounding Ole Miss. And now, following that loss, it seems like this is a must-win game going into this week against South Carolina and going into next week against LSU. If you lose to LSU, and look, Ole Miss may be looking ahead to them. I have no idea what their mentality is right now, but it's all about rebounding if you're Lane Kiffin. There's still the talk is about him going to Florida. But listen, if Ole Miss misses the playoff this year, everything will go back to that Kentucky loss and say, that's when we started to realize that Lane Kiffin will no longer be the head coach at Ole Miss. And this Ole Miss offense, as good as they are, you got to spread the football around. It can't just be Trey Harris on a consistent basis. As good as he is, there's got to be other guys involved, and you can't have the same problems lingering for you down the stretch of the end of the year. What else did I miss, you guys? Let me know in the comments down below. What is one overreaction that your favorite SEC team had this weekend? And what should we be looking out for down the stretch going into week 6 of the college football season? Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Lucas Hill saying so long.